DreAllDay.com.
We're now tuned in to the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve is yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, let's add a little bit more into this mix. You get a huge dose of personal initiative. That is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, me, you, him, her, whoever, to go and make things happen instead of wait for things to happen. And what we do is put all of this together into one bundle, one package, one mindset, one method, one philosophy, one book, one university, this daily masterclass, this show that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic, ignorance is not an excuse. Yes, you heard me correctly. That's the topic here today. To be ignorant is not an excuse for your actions, is not an excuse for your lack of actions. Let's get a definition of this word, ignorance, so that you know exactly what I mean when I say it, because people use this word. This word gets tossed around many different ways with different meanings depending on who's saying it. So I'm going to create the baseline here by giving you this definition so you understand what I mean when I say ignorance is not an excuse. Definition is a lack of knowledge or information, period. In other words, not knowing something or not having the information is not an excuse for you to do something that is detrimental to your success. It does not suffice as an explanation for you doing something that's detrimental to someone else's rights or success, or to the success of any community you happen to be a part of. Your business, your sports team, your company that you work for, your family, you and a partner, etc. Not knowing is not okay to say, I made this mistake because I didn't know what I was doing, or I didn't have the information, or nobody told me. Those are not acceptable excuses for mistakes in any area that matters to you today. So my argument that I'm making, to take it even further, is that in 2020 going forward, you're hearing this, or at least I'm recording it in 2020. Whenever you hear it, you hear it. Now this is evergreen content, so you might be listening to this in 2030. But it is not okay from this point, when I'm recording this forward, to lack information and knowledge that you need for things that are important to you in life. Now, you don't have to have information for everything, but the things that matter the most to you, it is not acceptable for you to not have the information. All that said, let's get into our points. Today's topic, once again, is ignorance is not an excuse. Number one, in episode number 993, masterclass number 993 of this show, I told you, mental errors are unacceptable. In other words, mistakes of skill, meaning you just aren't capable of doing something. If somebody passes you the ball in a basketball game and you're wide open for a three-pointer and you miss, all right, that we can accept that. Now, depending on the level that you're playing at and the team that you're on and what your role is, we might not accept it too many times, but sometimes in life you just may not physically be able to, tangibly be able to execute certain things. A skill error, I can understand a skill error because not everybody has the same skills. And I understand that in an imperfect world, being that we're all imperfect human beings, we're not always going to be perfect when it comes to skill and physical execution of the things that we do. But mental errors are not acceptable. Mentally, you can always be on point. Being mentally on point is a choice. Now, making every three-pointer is damn near impossible. I mean, Steph Curry doesn't make every three-pointer. But mentally, there's no excuse for you to not be in the right place or not know what you're doing, or just make a mistake of not paying attention, or get caught sleeping, or get caught not being on point. If and when you mess up on important stuff in life, saying I did not know is not an excuse. Everybody understand what I'm saying here? In episode number 387, I talked about how to be on point. So if you're not sure what that means, again, that's episode number 387. You can just go to DreAllDay.com/ put the number of the episode, put a dash after it, and then it'll pull up the episode. You can listen to it right there. I don't know is not an acceptable shield to protect you from mistakes. Not in 2020 and beyond. Maybe 20 years ago when information was not so widespread, we didn't have so much saturation of information, but now it's not okay anymore. We live in an information saturated world, meaning there is more of it than we actually need. So your biggest challenge these days is not in getting the information, it's in deciding which information you actually need to access, which information is most important to you, which information do you need to pay attention to since there's so much of it available to you. In episode number 1177, the topic was insight. Knowing which questions to answer and which information to access. That's what insight is about. It's not about having information, period. We all have information. Anybody who's listening to this right now, you have internet access and a smartphone. You have access to more information than damn near anyone in the world had access to even 30 years ago. And some of you are old enough that means more than you yourself at that time 30 years ago. Let's say 1990, any time in the 90s. Every one of us right now has more access to information than anybody had in the 90s, pretty much. Unless you happen to be a librarian or you're a publisher for an encyclopedia company, we got more information than everybody from even 30 years ago. So insight is understanding, asking the right questions so that you get to the right information. And also episode number 1431, the topic is discernment. That is your skill, personal judgment. And that, in other words, that means looking at information when you have a whole lot of it and deciding which of this information actually matters to me. And it's not all of it. If you don't know what you're doing and whatever you happen to be doing in life or think you're doing, your plan needs to be to solve the mysteries of what you're doing ahead of your most committed actions. In other words, before the actions that matter the most to you and areas that are most important to you, your job is to make sure that you get the right information before you start doing stuff. Get the right information before you start taking action, so you never need to explain or excuse yourself by saying, hey, I just didn't know. I just didn't have the information. Again, in the things that matter most to you. Now, explain to you, I'll give you a quick disclaimer of that as we move on to point number 2. The topic, once again, today is ignorance is not an excuse. Here's a disclaimer to what I'm saying here, that not knowing is not an acceptable answer when you make a mistake. This is not to say that you can't do anything in life unless you have a perfect plan in place. That is not what I'm saying. So I want to make sure I'm being clear here. You don't have to have a perfect plan in place and have 100% of the information before you take any action in life, because then you would never do anything. I mean, first of all, no plan is going to be perfect. No human being is perfect, so there's no such thing as a perfect plan. The only way a plan can be perfect is if you're making a plan after you've already achieved the outcome. Then you can just go lay it out. And then even then, if somebody else follows that plan, they're probably not going to get the exact same outcome that you got, because guess what? They're not you. So you don't need to have a perfect plan before you do something. I talked about this in episode number 1429. The topic was the 10% rule of information and action. And what I said in that episode was you need to start with only, when you have just 10% of the information, you can go and gain activity knowledge along the way. So with 10% of the information, 90% of the things that you'll need to know, you do not know them. You can start taking action right there. And then along the way, you'll start learning things and you'll build on that 10%. And those are in things that you can recover from. The 10% rule applies to things where if you make a mistake or you do the wrong thing or you go in the wrong direction or you find out you're walking into walls and you need to turn around and go the other way, you can recover from those mistakes. All right. Sometimes not knowing in life means you need to go get the information first before you do anything. Other times in life, it means you need to go take action and learn as you go. Let me give you an example. If you are going to fly a plane, I do not suggest you follow the 10% rule. Do not follow the 10% rule if you're going to fly planes. You don't want to start flying the plane, get up in the air, and then say, all right, I'll learn the other 90% along the way. No, you might not survive to even talk about that. So that one, you might want to get all the information before you start. But in other things, or another example of where you do not follow the 10% rule, where you will follow the 100% rule, is before you invest money into a business, for example, an investor is going to do their due diligence and researching and looking at the financials of that company to make sure that the facts match the sales pitch, all right? And then they do nothing if the facts that they find and the sales pitch that they were given do not match. Why is that? Because why would you invest your money in something that is not going to produce the result that you thought it was going to produce? It's just bad business. You might as well just flush the money down the toilet or set it on fire. Any of you ever watched the TV show Shark Tank or any of the other shows that have come up, spawned after them that are in a similar vein, where an entrepreneur comes out, presents a business, and says, hey, I want someone to buy into my business or buy the business completely off of me. I value the business at this much. You investors who have the money, you put in this much, you become part owner of this business that I've created, and we both make money together. So any of you ever watched the TV show Shark Tank? I think almost everyone who's listening to this has an idea what the show is about. Hopefully you do. What happens is, what you see on TV, there may be a negotiation going on, and then a deal is made, and then people shake hands, and it's great theater, it's great television. After those, what you see on TV, the handshake and all that, the investors, the Damon Johns and the Lori Greniers and Barbara Corcoran and Kevin O'Leary, and I can't remember Mark Cuban, and there's the other guy that sits on the end on the right side. I forgot the guy's name. I can't remember it now. I might think of it before the end of this episode. But those sharks, after they shake the hand and they have all the stuff on TV, first of all, it's edited down just to fit the hour-long episode of the show. They don't show you the entire thing. Then after that, the sharks go and actually look at the books. They look at the financials of that company. They look at the sales numbers. They look and make sure that everything that the entrepreneur presented in the Shark Tank on TV that you saw, they go and make sure that all those things are actually true. They make sure that all the answers that shark gave are actually reflective of the actual stats and actual facts of the business. And if it's not, then those investments that you see agreed to on TV do not actually commensurate. They don't actually happen. And if they do check out that everything that the entrepreneur offering a sale of their business, or at least a percentage of it, if it does check out, then the sharks move forward and they do the deal, and hopefully, it doesn't happen all the time, hopefully everybody lives happily ever after. So on the other hand, that's on the side of where maybe not 100% rule, but a 95% rule or more. If we're talking about flying the plane, you might want to follow the 100% rule. Get 100% of the information before you start. Or skydiving off a building, you might want to follow the 100% rule. Anything which you cannot recover from a mistake, follow the 100% rule. Anything in which you probably don't want to make too many mistakes is somewhere between the 90 and the 95% rule, like investing in a business. Just because you invest in a business, Mark Cuban or Damon John, Kevin O'Leary, doesn't necessarily mean that business is going to keep making money. Maybe it was doing good last year, it doesn't mean it's going to do good next year. So that's a 90 and 95% rule, because you can't guarantee that it's going to work out. Now, where would you follow the 10% rule, where you just need to get a little bit of information, then just go do your thing and you learn along the way? An example is what you're listening to right now. I might publish a piece of content on a certain subject or create a product without knowing if it's going to work or not, without knowing if it's going to land with the audience or not, if it's going to get the kind of results or response that I expected it to get. And if it doesn't, then it's okay, because tomorrow we got another episode coming. Tomorrow I can write another blog post. Tomorrow I can put out, next week I can put out another product. I can recover from the mistake in those areas. So it's okay for me to be ignorant of what's going to happen, because I can recover from those mistakes. With those, I get activity knowledge through doing the thing. The 90% that I need to find out, I find out through doing, not through reading and listening and signing up for courses and all of that shit. I get that by actually taking the action and figuring it out along the way. Point number 3. Today's topic is ignorance is not an excuse. You got to have your fingers on the pulse of what's important to you. There's an important phrase that I keep using over and over here today. Hopefully you've noticed it. The phrase is, what's important to you? And this changes on a case-by-case basis. Maybe it can change in your own life. From now, 5 years from now, what's important to you may be completely different from what's important to you today. Or the person who's sitting right next to you now, what's important to them is not the same as what's important to you. So for you, you got to have your fingers on the pulse of what is the most important thing for you. This is where you take the concept of what I talked about in masterclass number 1254. The topic is inches and miles. Knowing when you need to go an inch wide and a mile deep. The areas in which you're going an inch wide and a mile deep, the things that are most important to you, you got to have your fingers on the pulse of what's going on in that area. So for example, if you are one of the sharks in the Shark Tank, Damon John, Mark Cuban, Kevin O'Leary, Lori Grenell, Barbara Corcoran, if you're one of those people, you got to have your fingers on the pulse of what's going on, at least in the industry in which you invest in companies. You might not need to know everything about investing and everything about business, because they're a little bit too vast for anyone to know everything, and the information is always being added to and changing. But if you're a person who's into the tech world, you need to know what's going on in the tech world. You need to be reading the tech publications. You need to know who are the people who usually have the newest and most pertinent information in the tech world, and you need to be listening to them and following them, and knowing somebody who knows somebody who has that information, because that's the area that matters the most to you. If you're a basketball player looking to play professionally, you need to have your fingers on the pulse of what's going on in the professional basketball world. What are the websites? Who are the people? Who are the people who have the information? Who are the people who can help you get from where you are to the next place? Who are the people who have already done it? Who are the people who've made mistakes? Who are the people who are sharing with the next generation what mistakes you need to avoid? You need to know who those people are. It is your job to find out who these individuals are, because again, today's topic is ignorance is not an excuse to say, well, I just didn't know where the information was. I didn't know who to ask. I didn't know where to look. If you're listening to my voice right now, I just referred you to several episodes of this show, several masterclasses here on this show that will help you figure out where to look and what to look for. The episodes on insight, the episodes on discernment, the episodes on inches and miles. All right, these are all your job, ladies and gentlemen. What are the areas We're still on point number 3 here, having your fingers on the pulse of what's important to you. What are the areas of your life where you need to know a whole lot about a little bit? In other words, take a small topic, but know as much as you possibly can about it. Whatever those areas are for you, you either need to get that information, or you need to have people around you who can fill in the gaps that you can't fill yourself, or that you don't want to fill yourself, or it would just be more efficient for somebody else to fill. Whatever the reason is, those gaps need to be filled either by you or by someone else. For example, when I was playing basketball, I knew as much as anyone can know about actually playing the game, executing in moves and angles and doing stuff on the basketball court. But I didn't know everything about the movements of the body and the way to train the body and the kinetic chain, and how working one part of the body affects another part of the body, and how an injury in one area doesn't necessarily mean there's something wrong with that area. It might just mean there's another area that's causing an imbalance, that's forcing the area that's hurting to work a little bit too hard, and that's why I'm getting pain. I didn't know about that stuff. So what did I do? I found someone who could fill that gap. Now, I had 2 options. I could go back to school and get myself a kinesiology degree and study personal training and study anatomy. That would have took away from my basketball training. So what I did was go find someone who had already done that. This type of person who calls himself a trainer, or a certified strength and conditioning coach, or a performance coach. And there were plenty of them out there. So I went and found one of those people who already had that information. They filled the gaps for me. They understood the movement of the body, and they could help me get in my best shape so I could play at my peak. They had information that I just didn't have. When it turned to business, for example, I needed to learn how to market myself. So I learned marketing. I learned about copywriting. I learned about structuring a business. Listen to episodes of this show, episode number 1637 and 1638, when I talked about the podcasts that I like to listen to, and I have specific podcasts of people who talk about structuring business. People tell stories about business. People who interview people who have run businesses and started businesses, successful and failing businesses. People who talk about marketing every episode. People who talk about copywriting every episode. People who talk about business structure every episode. I went and found these people, and I started immersing myself in that information because I realized those are gaps that I needed to close myself. You need to know what you need to know, and then make it your business to know it. Allow me to repeat that last sentence. You need to know what you need to know, and then make it your business to know it. Again, whether you personally get the information, or you go find someone who has the information or is willing to get the information themselves, and then you and that person can put your heads together, and the synergy between both of you knowing what you know, everyone bringing something else to the table, whatever way you need to do it, but understand that information gap needs to be filled. All right, there is no excuse for an information gap in the year 2020 and beyond. Okay, there's no excuse for anyone to be ignorant and not know what's going on. Make it your job to have all the information you need for the areas that matter to you. Let's recap today's class, which is ignorance is not an excuse. The definition of ignorance that I am referring to today is lack of knowledge or information. To be ignorant means to not know. It is not okay to not know. My argument today is that in the year 2020 and forward, it is not okay to lack information and knowledge that is important to you for what you need. Point number 1, I told you the mental errors are unacceptable back in episode 993. When you mess up on important stuff, saying I didn't know is not an okay shield to protect you. All right, it is your job to figure out which information you need. So see episodes 1177 on insight and episodes 1431 on discernment. If you don't know what you're doing, it is your job to solve the unsolved mysteries. Point number 2, this is not to say that you can't do anything without a perfect plan in place, because no plan is perfect, no human is perfect. You would never do anything if that was actually true. In episode number 1429, I talked about the 10% rule of information and action. In many areas of life, you only need 10% of information to get started, but there are some areas where you need all the information to get started. For example, if you're going to go fly a plane, get all the information before you get started. Do not apply the 10% rule to flying a plane, because you might die. All right, do not apply the 10% rule to investing in businesses, because you'll probably lose your shirt and lose all your money. You probably want to go somewhere between 90 and 100% of the information in some areas of life. But other areas, for example, creating a product or putting out an episode of your YouTube on your YouTube channel, or a new masterclass episode on your daily show, you can put something out that might not work, and that's okay, because you can recover from those mistakes. In areas in which you cannot recover from the mistake in a way that you will be all right with, apply the 90 to 100% rule. Okay, so there's a difference between the two. It's levels to this shit. Number 3, have your fingers on the pulse of what's important to you. This is where you take the concept of episode number 1254, where I talked about inches and miles. Where is it okay for you to know a whole lot about a little bit? And then in those areas, that whole lot, either you need to have it, or you need to place people around you who fill the gap to make sure that all the information you need is covered. For example, if you're an athlete, you might not know everything about human anatomy and the way that the body moves. Even though you have a great anatomy and your body moves great, doesn't mean you know how to train for it. So you go get yourself a trainer. You go get yourself a physical therapist. You have people who help you with recovery. Even the best athletes in the world have people who do these things for them so they can focus on the main thing, which is them performing out there on the court. For me in sports, I went and found me a trainer because I knew there were certain things that I didn't know. And at first I didn't know that I didn't know, and it was unacceptable. So I went and got the information. Once I found out that I didn't know that thing, I made sure I kept those people close to me. In the business world, I knew I needed to learn about marketing myself and how to use my words to persuade and how to structure a business. So I had to go find the people who had this information because it was unacceptable for me to call myself a CEO or a business person and not understand how to market myself, how to promote myself, how to sell myself, how to use words persuasively, or how to structure a business. How you a business person don't know how to structure a business? It makes no sense. I had to go get that information. I had to fill the gaps, and I found people who were filling those gaps, and I put myself as close as I could to those individuals, even if I had to pay my way in. So see episodes number 1637 and 1638, where I talk about the shows that I listen to, and I tell you exactly where I got that information from. Know what you need to know about what you need to know about, then make it your business to know it. Ignorance is not okay. Work on your game. Dre, all